Well, Raj, welcome to 160 Studios.
It's wonderful to be here and to finally meet you, Joe. Gosh, I'm so excited about doing this in person.
Yeah, and you and I have had our, I think, twice a month calls since we got to know each other.
Yep.
Almost over a year ago now.
Yep.
And we met through
Tal Wenderow. Yeah, so it's interesting. I met Tal almost 2 years ago at JP Morgan. So 2020, we were connected and we met, as you do, in the lobby of a hotel. And there was just something there. Tal and I just hit it off. We had lots of people in common. And literally a few weeks later, he said, Raj, you need to meet this friend of mine, this really close friend of mine, Joe Mullings. And there was that email connection, and literally we started talking then. And I'm so excited to have built that friendship.
Yeah, same. And what's really interesting is, so your background, I want you to share it with our viewers, but what caught me right away was your immersion and insinuation in the surgical robotic world, in the tech world of healthcare,
right,
and leading a leading hospital in their sort of eval and integration of their system. So if you could share your background.
Yeah, well, I just feel so privileged to be where I'm at right now. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s, I'm working with a bunch of commercial companies, but my background is, well, let's put it plain and simple. My older sister used to say, Raj, you're brown and male. What are you going to do? You're going to become a doctor, right? That's what I did. I always wanted to go to medical school, always wanted to be a surgeon, loved it. I did my scientific training. I did my PhD, as you mentioned, around robotics, virtual reality, worked with a bunch of those companies over 20 years ago. And then my career has kind of been repetitive in essence. It's been, I want to really do that thing. And then I get good at it. And then I'm like, okay, now what's the next leap I can take? And now what's the next leap? And that's kind of how I've been fortunate to be driving my career forward, but also been surrounded by some amazing people from within healthcare and from outside healthcare. And as you said, my last role was working for Jefferson Health System, where I literally built their Ventures Innovation Partnerships Group, which gave me exposure to companies such as Livongo, Teladoc, and many others. And now I'm, quite frankly, a retired professor of surgery. And I say that to people, they're like, you don't look old enough, right? And working fully in the commercial space and just absolutely loving it.
Yeah. And you and I, we've chatted over, again, over the last year plus. And your profile is interesting because you take these great surgeons, you take these great docs, and they become masters of their universe. And they say they see the other side, meaning the commercial side. And especially as exciting as health tech, med tech is right now with telehealth and imaging navigation, robotics,
right,
predictive analytics, IR, right? All that kind of stuff. But then you get over to the other side.
Right.
And some of the world-class players who totally leave practice go, okay, this commercial side's really cool, but I didn't realize there was such a trudgery with the FDA and
right,
manufacturing,
right,
and IP and
right,
qual and clin. I want to be here,
right,
right on that tip of innovation.
Right.
And I find a lot of big thinkers and lateral thinkers who are surgeons who get over to the other side get bored. How come?
As a surgeon, right, what do we want? We want instant reward, right? That's why we became surgeons and not physicians or psychiatrists, right? I want to go in the operating room and there is a patient who has reflux. I can fix that in an hour. The patient wakes up and says, I don't have reflux anymore. Woohoo, all right? And that's what I've done thousands of times, right? And that is that instant gratification, right? That I just think we have in our phenotype, genotype, whatever you want to call it. And so when I want to go and get something done, right, I get it done. And if someone is going to slow me down or something is going to slow me down, what happens? I get frustrated, right? I get annoying to be around.
You're an entrepreneur. I have the same problem.
And I think the challenge for surgeons in this space is you're like, but I had this in my other life. Why can't I have it in this life, right? In this kind of commercial space. Why is it so difficult, right? I was chair of surgery. I was a professor of surgery, that kind of stuff. And what I really like about, I said this to a colleague I had lunch with today, is what I really like about the commercial space is you are really valued on your impact, right? And that's not to say the thousands of patients I've operated on and others don't value me, right? And other surgeons, that the academic work isn't valued. But you really are, it's explicit, right? Quarter on quarter, you get these deals done, you get this revenue in. It is very objective, right? And it's not just, well, she's a great surgeon, or he's a great guy, went to Duke, went to Harvard, went to Imperial, whatever. Those things don't matter that much. And you've got to be, how do I put it, humble. To kind of go, I'm in this new space.
Yeah.
And I'm not the professor of surgery anymore. And I chose to be in this new space. There's nothing stopping me from going back, but I chose, and I want to drive and learn and succeed, because that's that intellectual stimulation, right? How do I get this shit done?
Mm-hmm. And it's, I'm glad you said that, because as I was prepping for our session today, I said, so you've got these gods and goddesses coming from surgery, right? And what they say in their domain is what happens, to your point. And then you walk into this new technology that you're on the user end typically, but not on the creating end. And you're sitting around with software engineers, hardware engineers, clinical experts, regulatory experts, and you are the new kid on the block.
Right.
And you've got to manage going from sort of alpha, apex, predator, to now you stand in line there, and nobody cares a lot what you say until it comes to workflow or UI, UX. Right?
Yeah.
But you're not going to be coding in Python, and you're not going to, right? So it takes a very dynamic, agile personality. And I'm just curious, when you sit at the table and these new technologies come out, what goes through your mind? How do you shape shift in that area?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm going to take this back to 20 years ago when I did my PhD working with the first Da Vinci robot that came to the UK, and a bunch of other technologies around VR and motion tracking and eye tracking, right? I didn't understand the technology. And look, I've got a curious mind, right? But my approach was, how do we apply this technology in the clinical environment for clinical, operational, and financial metrics of success? And that is the similar lens that I take for when I work with the companies now, right? We've mentioned Proximy and a few other companies. There are really smart people developing this technology, right? I want to understand some of it, or a lot of it, because I'm just intellectually curious, right? But my key role here is, as a clinician, as a scientist, and as a business person, right? How is this going to be successful, right? And that is really important. And then the other piece is, I just want to throw in there, is that alpha male surgeon, right? Or alpha female surgeon, right? Someone said to me, it's like, Raj, when you were at Jefferson and running ventures, like, everyone wanted to come and speak to you, and everyone would fly in, like, you know, the C-suite of companies, and the CEO would fly in and see you because you were the buyer, right? You had the money and they wanted to sell into you. Now you're on the other side. You're the seller, right? You're knocking on all these doors.
So how does that feel?
It ain't easy, I'll tell you. It is, like, I saw a lot of salespeople, sales reps, like in my 20 years of clinical practice. And towards the end of it, I could see that the best sales reps were the ones that weren't selling you anything. They were the ones that didn't want to build a transaction, wanted to build a relationship. And I remember one of the sales reps from a med device company, she said, Dr. Agarwal, I'm not here to come and tell you about this robot or that device or whatever. You know more about this than I do. I just want to get to know you. She was the best sales rep I ever met.
So you would have a different level of empathy right now if I could teletransport you back 24 months, 36 months to the role you were in before, and those salespeople or those people who wanted to come and get in your inner circle to sell you a device. You would think differently now, wouldn't you?
I would, and do you know where I'd be most empathetic is not the ones that, you know, I want the device and it's going to work. The ones where I didn't want the device, or the sale was just not set up in the right way. I would just kind of say, hey, really nice to meet you, but I'm not interested. I'd actually take a little bit more time to kind of give them some feedback, right? Say, look, maybe you could have done this better, or maybe you did well here, but when I put you in front of my department or division, things could have been better, or that kind of stuff. And I think, that's just in me, is like, how do we grow ourselves, but also how do we grow others around us as well? And I was in that powerful position. And part of me says, I didn't give that feedback to enough people. And so that's probably where I'd have most empathy. Yeah.
In our discussions over the last, year or so, I asked, Raj, why would you want to move out of that role? Why would you move out? And then you said to me, I can operate on a few hundred or a few thousand people in my life.
Yeah.
But when I go over to the device side,
Right.
I can impact millions.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is not my story. It's become my story. But back in 2006, I was in the UK. I was working at Imperial College London. My chairman of surgery, Professor Aradazi, has been my mentor, continues to be my mentor. He brought the first Da Vinci robot into the UK. That's what I worked on. And in 2006, he brought the department together, about 30, 40 of us, in the conference room, and said, folks, I'm going to be taking a sabbatical for the next 9 months. The then Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, you heard of him?
Heard of him.
The then Mayor of London said, has asked me to lead a review for healthcare in London. And this is something that I'm going to do over the next 9 months. And so rather than operating 3 days a week, I'm going to operate half a day every fortnight. And I know you guys are all going to be great, and you're going to manage to run the department. And most people are like, but Ara was like one of the leaders of the laparoscopic revolution, right? Published the first series of patients on laparoscopic colorectal surgery, and many, many other things, right? And the chair of medicine at Imperial, another pretty well-known individual, put his hand up and said, Ara, how many patients can you operate on every year? I said, maybe 400, maybe 500. You've changed those patients' lives and probably their families' lives. Here's your opportunity to change 8 million lives. And that just stuck with me. It's about impact. And really, I've just taken that and said, how do I have the opportunity to impact many lives? And when I was thinking about moving on from Jefferson, the exact thing I said to the CEO, Steve Klasko, is, I love what I've done here at Jefferson, right? We've brought, 15, 17 companies. We've done strategic partners. We've done venture investing. We've brought value from a clinical and an operational and a financial perspective to Jefferson. I want to do this at 20 Jeffersons, at 50 Jeffersons. I want to impact tens of millions of lives. And that's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's been the drive. That's been the drive. So what are the biggest lessons you've learned in your initial foray into the commercial side that we haven't talked about? What are the things that you didn't expect to happen that are happening right now, either to you personally or from the people that you've worked with? What have been the aha moments?
I'll say that the two things that I've really learned is, one, I was brought up, I said, the funny thing my sister said about me always going to be a doctor, right? And that's how I was brought up, is like, doctors are good people and they're the ones that care about the health of society. I don't spend much time with doctors now. I spend my time with engineers, with VC folks, with finance people, with technology people, with marketing people, right? And many others. And the passion that they bring to want to impact healthcare is mind-blowing. And I would say actually that passion and drive is almost greater than, sad to say, many of the doctors that work in our health system right now, right? There's a lot of stress and burnout and exhaustion of many of our providers, not just doctors, nurses, and many other allied care providers. So that has been an aha moment, right? Everyone has a story about healthcare that is working in healthcare, whether they're a VR technologist or an engineer or a finance person. And that to me is mind-blowing. I think the second piece I just love is the discipline. There is so much discipline. Like, I'm working with a company right now, Panda Health. We've raised a couple of seed rounds. We're going out to raise a Series A. We have a financial model, we have a quarter-on-quarter discipline, and we've got to maintain that or keep ahead of that, right? Otherwise, we don't. In 6 months, we're done. There ain't no more money, right? And I just love that being held to account. And I remember in some of my academic roles, you know, wherever I've worked, I used to even say to my boss or my boss's boss or the head of the university, I'm like, how are you holding me to account, right? I'm spending all this money. And they're like, you're a great guy, Raj. Maybe I've just not been in the right jobs, or maybe I have been in the right jobs in academic medicine.
Well, you're not an administrator. That's what it is.
Right. I've had, you know, yes, I can do what I want to do within reason, right? And it's going back to that kind of that alpha male, that ego approach is like, people care who I am, but people care more about what I do.
Correct.
What I get done.
And you know, you mentioned the aha moment on the passion, drive, and commitment that individuals have to medtech, health tech, who are outside the OR. And they all typically, you know, in my 30 years and probably conservatively tens of thousands of conversations with people who are shaping the industry, they all have a Kevin Bacon, only 1 degree of separation of why they stay in this industry instead of going to keep somebody on a browser for another 38 seconds as a software engineer, or as an ME, maybe going on driverless cars. You know, they all have their place in society, but none of them sort of impact at scale somebody directly related to them. And when people leave, very rarely do they leave the industry. They boomerang back in a very short time. So there's something really magical there. On the flip side of that is, what is the lesson that you still see vacant from your perspective on the commercial side that the commercial don't quite get when they talk to you, Raj, 18, 20 months ago when you were back at Jefferson? What are they still missing, or what could they do better?
I think there's 2 things, actually, I'd say. And they're kind of 2 ends of a spectrum, right? When an early stage company comes and talks to us, right, they will sometimes say, hey, here is the product or the technology, and it does all of this kind of stuff, and this is what you need, right? They're literally saying, you guys are dumb, we're smart, we know how to do this, right? Buy this stuff, right? And then there's the other end. And that's okay. That side probably works. You know, not quite the dumb smart piece, but here is something that could actually work for you. And you know, here's some baseline data on clinical and operational, and maybe even a financial model for how this could work. Then there's the other side, and this is where I actually get more frustrated. Is we've built a technology, and when the questions come from the health system or the leadership, can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do this? Not being laser focused on the area that you as a company are really trying to solve, and say, oh yeah, we could do this. We could open up all of this. You can set the approach as you want, and almost just saying, you know, yeah, we built this technology and it can do everything, right? And I've actually been in this situation many times. It's like, hang on, are you running the company, or do you want me to come and run the company, right? So I think that's one area of really kind of, this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and this is how we can partner to work it out better, right? And I think the other piece, I would say, and this is less about the company and more about how our health systems function, right, is I was at Jefferson and worked with a bunch of early stage companies. What we do, you've all heard the term death by pilot, right? Sure. We'd bring companies in, we'd do a 3, 6, 9-month eval, right? And then we'd decide, you know, whether to continue, and it would be within a part of the organization. Might be 3 hospitals out of the 14, or one clinic, and that kind of stuff. And the companies would come in, we'd set all this up, we'd have a lot of work put in, and then the pilot would work, right? And then the health system would say, that's great, it's a nice to have, not a must have. And so I would be, and I've counseled a bunch of companies on this, I would be more aggressive to say, if it works, right, whatever that is, whatever those metrics are, then there is a seamless approach for us to go enterprise-wide. And if it doesn't work, I probably don't have a company. so I'm going to go and kill this one and start the next one. And I think it's about the companies really developing that partnership with the health system to know the success means success and failure means failure. And one of the things I remember, another friend of mine who's an investor in digital health told me is, Raj, do you know 99 yeses and 1 no in a health system boardroom is a draw.
Yeah.
We've got to avoid that 1 no, right?
Well, that's interesting, because what I have learned from a lot of my friends on the clinician side, the surgeon side, the operator side is there's not really an alignment amongst the stakeholders when you start to talk about, the healthcare system, the surgeon themselves, the payers, the device companies, the future-facing technologies. They're not all aligned even close. You've got almost 4 different points on the compass they all have vested interest in. So now, with your perspective sliding over to the commercial side, give me some insight on that.
Yeah, look, it reminds me of a story. There's a mentor of mine. He's been a mentor of mine for 15 years. He's a surgeon in Australia. He's retired now. He was president of the Royal Australian College of Surgeons. And I spoke to him about a year ago as I was leaving Jefferson, and he said, Raj, tell me about what you were successful at Jefferson. I said, well, we looked at 500 companies. We invested in 17 of them, and about 5 of them really worked, right? We really kicked it out of the park. I said, what was different about those 5 companies? There's a question only a mentor asks you, right? You just kind of think, yeah. And I paused for a good while. We were on a Zoom call together, right? And I said, you know what, Bruce? It wasn't the technology. It wasn't the commercial model. Do you know what it was? It was the CEO of every one of those 5 companies committed to get to know the leadership within Jefferson, and they built a relationship together, right? And I was the conduit to make that happen. I often say I had 2 bosses when I was at Jefferson. One was the CEO of Jefferson, Steve Klasko, and the other one was the CEO of every company I worked with. And that commitment to success, that understanding, look, we're human beings. We have to understand each other. It's not just selling technology. You know that better than anyone, right? That's what really drove the success, right? Of being able to iterate, being able to understand each other. And so when you talk about all these varying stakeholders, right? I mean, it's a Gestalt view, but it's about hearing and understanding everyone's perspective, right? And once you hear, then other people will hear you, right? And engage with you. And so I remember sometimes we'd have we'd have these monthly kind of meetings between Company X and Jefferson leadership and whatever. We would, myself and the CEO and the COO and a couple of other people, VP of sales from the company, will get together, coffee, lunch for like an hour, 2 hours, and we'd prep the meeting. This is how it's going to go. Similarly, I'd do that on the clinical side with the Jefferson folks, right? And then we'd have the meeting, and then we'd debrief. And it was just about kind of that, gosh, I guess you call it a shared model, shared mental model. That was the approach at a very high level. Yeah.
Are we rewarding our hospital setting? So 2-part question. Are we rewarding our hospitals, or are they held to an economic model that is a benefit for the patient as well as the 18% of our GDP, or are they not? And then second part to that question is, where do you see the centers of care shifting away from the hospital to where?
So the first question kind of really gets me going because I'm English. I grew up in the national health system, right? We did not get paid on the basis of the number of cases we did, right? There are no RVUs in the UK, right? As a clinician, you were paid a standard salary, and you can say, well, that's bad because the guy or gal that doesn't do enough cases, right, gets paid the same as a person who's like working all day every day, right? I disagree with that too, right? But it was very much around, it's a capitated model. This is what the patient needs, and this is what they get, right? And having been in the US now almost a decade, I love it here. I'm going to stay here forever, and my wife and kids love it here as well. And we can debate, and I've spent 3 years in Canada as well, which is kind of somewhere in the middle. But there is, when you talk about the health systems getting paid for the right thing, no. They're not getting paid for delivering value-based care. And value-based care has become such an empty word now. I mean, I remember thinking about innovation being an empty word, right? Like people just use it out there and there. But what do you want? What does your family want out of care? You want to be told what's going on. You want to be engaged in that care. You want to be empowered in that care. And you want, very simply in this kind of modern world, you want the right care at the right place at the right time, right? That's what matters to you, right? And unfortunately, the way that health systems are set up, right? You call it the commercial payers, even federal payers and so forth, is based on volume, right? And that has kind of perverse incentives down to the level of the department and down to the level of the surgeon. It reminds me of, look, let's not go too far down this road, but volume outcome relationships have been around for 20 years. You do more of something, this isn't just healthcare, it's anything. You do more of something, you get better at it, right? My kid practices more basketball in the front yard, he gets better at it, right? And it reminds me, and something I've just been thinking about, and I remember Dean and I at Proximy were talking about this, is you want to centralize care, right? And Nadine, Proximy is developing the technology to be able to obviate that. But 10 years ago, there was this volume pledge, 3 health systems. It was Hopkins, it was University of Michigan, it was Dartmouth, said, we're going to do all the complex surgery in the academic center. That's where it needs to be done because we know the outcomes are better, right? And it didn't happen because the surgeon that was in a peripheral hospital said, yeah, but I don't want to lose those 2 Whipple procedures I do a year. They bring me value. Is that the right thing for the patient? No. But is that how our health system's set up? Yeah. And back in the UK, we set up these kind of cancer centers, stroke centers, trauma centers. It is illegal to operate on a cancer patient in a hospital that does not have accreditation as a high-volume cancer center in the UK.
Is that a geography benefit? Because I think the U.S. a little bit larger than that in access, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got a head count, we've got geography issues, we've got less and less doctors being graduated, but we've got better technology coming. So,
10 years ago, it was a geography issue.
Yeah.
Now it's a technology issue. I mean, we've had the Da Vinci robot for over 20 years right now. Telesurgery hasn't really taken off, right? Why not, right? Telemedicine obviously has taken off in the last year, right? So I think it's now much more of a technology issue, but it's also a hierarchy issue as well.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Is whenever you get these hierarchies, invariably hierarchies lead to bad behavior, right? If not left in check and monitored properly, right? Even though it's a hierarchy in the beginning, a hierarchy of competency, right? That's a great thing. Hierarchies of competency are beautiful, until it becomes entirely owned and twisted interests in the loss of that hierarchy when it's not based on competency anymore.
It reminds me of a quote from another mentor of mine who was chair of surgery at a very well-known health system in the Midwest for 20 years. And he was retiring, he was giving his retiring speech, and I went up to him, said, what's the one lesson that you've learned in the last 20 years that's really surprised you? People's relationship with money. I was expecting him to say something so profane and different.
But that is pretty profound in itself. But it will only amplify who you are.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion, is if you're a good soul, money will amplify that. If
I like that.
If there's a malevolence in you, it will amplify that as well. I think that's certainly true. Okay, and then final question.
I forgot the second part of your question. You had
the second, the centers of care, they're shifting, right?
Yeah.
So the centers of care, they're shifting right now.
Yeah.
So what do you forecast happening in those, that monolithic brick building in the middle of the city?
Yeah.
Is it our best option, or are we better off having a hub and spoke situation?
I love that question because this, quite frankly, is what I think I want to work on in the next 5, maybe 10 years of my life. Right now, we have health systems, whether they're the top 20 in US News and World Report or a regional health system in the middle of the country, right? And they say, come to health system XYZ, we are your end-to-end, cradle to grave, we'll do everything for you, right? And that was probably true 20 years ago, okay? And now what I believe is when you look at, let's just take primary care, ambulatory care, secondary care, right? You've got the One Medicals of the world, you've got Optum Surgical Care, you've got other entities that are doing that so well, not only from a quality perspective, but also from an efficiency and a cost perspective, right? They're doing it better than most of the marquee brands, right? And then you look at the kind of the other end of the spectrum, the post-acute care, the population health, social determinants of health. There are so many companies in that space right now, a lot of them with a digital platform, but a lot of them with home care agencies, durable medical equipment. And again, guess what? They do it better than your marquee health system does. And then there's a lot of the back office stuff, whether it's RevCycle, whether it's companies such as Cedar and Olive that are doing a lot of that stuff as well. And so my approach is, well, health system X, Y, and Z, don't try to do everything on what, a 1% operating margin, right? Why don't we actually check our ego at the door? Let's say we're really good at some secondary, tertiary, quaternary. You need cardiac surgery, you're going to go down to Jefferson. You need redo bariatric surgery, you're going to go to the Cleveland Clinic, right? But let's not try and do this front end and this back end and the supporting services, right? Let's partner. And I think that is just a really, really strong approach. So I think it's much more than a hub and spoke, right? Mm-hmm. Hub and spoke, I actually don't like it because it has a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And back at Jefferson, we used to talk about a hub and hub approach. But again, it's kind of this model. I'm just like, let's have this continuous care model for you, for I, for our families, for others, right? But let's get the best parts together. And in my opinion, that's going to improve quality because now the best people are doing the best parts. It's going to improve access because now it's available where it needs to be. It's going to reduce cost because these folks know how to do different parts and we're doing the secondary, tertiary care because we're really good at it. And of course it's going to improve experience, right? Because the One Medicals, the Dispatch Health, they are focused on this digital platform, right? And so how we build that solution, again, I'll say it, the first thing is we need to work with health systems, health delivery systems. Maybe we take a service line approach, right? And figure that out because one health system can't do it all, right? Mm. And that's not how we work in any other industry, right?
It's very true. It's again, the insularity of the healthcare, health tech industry and the lack of sharing of information. And I don't know if Nadine owned this statement, but she said, you can't take a siloed approach to a systemic issue.
Yep.
And I agree with you. The last 5 to 6 years, especially in health tech, med tech, has clearly shown that there's competency and incompetency. And with the introduction of digital as being the tail that's wagging the dog in health tech, whether it's chronic care or acute care, it definitely is digitally influenced. And med tech has never had an expertise in that.
Yeah. And let me add to that. So when we talk about med tech, we very much think about the hardware, right? And
it's easy to think about the hardware.
Right. And I remember literally maybe 15 years ago, some OEMs would say, Raj, we don't want to be a hardware company, we want to be a solution, right? We want to be a solution within the healthcare system. So that starts from the moment the patient goes to their doctor and has blood in their stool or has an early diagnosis of something that's going to need surgery, all the way through to recovery from that surgical insult, right? And so how do med tech companies, right, in the traditional sense, work through that to be that solution, right? And again, to partner, right? Not just to focus on, I'm in operating room 71, and this is what I'm going to do with this device, right? And I know they're all working on this, but that again aligns with this model about, quite frankly, it's based around clinical care pathways, right? Because that's how we deliver care. So how does the technology, the people, the processes all work together to deliver that?
And then finally, so this is one of my favorite subjects to chat about, and it's one that you're living through right now and aggressively pursuing is, I love the constant learning. I love the upskilling. I love the ongoing commitment to sort of expanding our experience as we live in this world. And you were already set. By most people's scorecard, you were already set. And you don't have to go into detail. You had lunch today with an individual who had an unbelievable career, and he's in his mid-60s now, and pursuing something aggressively. Yeah? And so what would you leave our viewers with when you think about, are you done learning at 21 or 23 or 28, or when you decide university's over, or how do you enhance your experience on this earth, and how do you give to others? So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's really important. The words that are coming into mind, and I'll explain those in a moment, is the words that are coming into mind are curiosity, intent, and impact. And the face that's coming into my mind right now is a gentleman called Arnold Steinberg, who was Chancellor of McGill University when I was there. Arnold was in his late 70s. He was a businessman. He had a family business of 300 supermarkets around Canada and, strangely, in Arizona. And kind of had always been interested in health and education, and retired from the family business. His son was running that. And he then decided to get into academia and became the Chancellor of McGill University. I got to meet him. He was actually chair of the search committee for the role to build an innovation program at McGill. And I remember asking him within a few months of, Arnold, like, what keeps you so young? He said, curiosity. It's like Google is the best thing out there in terms of search, right? I can just have an idea and I can go and learn about it, right? And I think that kind of curiosity and intent, right? It's not enough just to have curiosity, I wonder if, right? But it's to build that around intent, right? And then how do I surround myself or get into a circle of other people who want to collaborate and commit to that impact, right? And it does keep me young. It keeps me excited. And just reading about new stuff, old stuff that has become new again, I just can't imagine a world where I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. And the way my wife calls it is, Raj, when I look at you and you lie on the sofa and the TV's on and you're looking at the ceiling,
you know something's up.
She's like, oh dear, here we go again. He's thinking of something. Where are we moving to now? What's the next thing? But that really is it. And she's like, she says sometimes, Raj, it's exhausting listening to you because you've got so many ideas. You do this, you do this. And I was like, yeah, but that's what keeps me excited. That's what keeps me young. And it's about surrounding myself with people like that.
Yeah, it's a gift to have that curiosity aligned with intent, and constantly pushing forward. So I think that's really important for people to understand. It's so hypercritical for their fulfillment. So, well, my friend, I appreciate the time you spent with us and sharing our journey. And you're one of my subject matter experts we're going to have to go to on what's next, where's it going, what should we be looking for. So I'm going to count on you for that.
Well, Joe, thank you so much. It's just been a privilege to get to know you and look forward to getting plenty more FaceTime together after the year we've been through.
For sure, no doubt. So Philly's a good city for me. I can go there, and you can always come down to Palm Beach.
I'm always down here. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you, buddy.
See ya.
Yeah.
Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.